Kaguya-sama's second season is in full swing. For now, given the current circumstances. Regardless, at the time of writing this, I cannot stop listening to the new OP, but that's not why we're here. Because I've also listened to the first one roughly 120,000 times, give or take. Not just because it's a bop and a half and I love it, but because it never fails to make me happy. The same can be said for this new OP and just the entire series. It was far and away my favorite anime of 2019 because it was a constant bright spot in my week while it was airing. And now every other month when a new volume of the manga drops, that continues to be true. And with things like happiness and optimism currently feeling like a luxury rather than natural human emotions, I wanted to share something I love with all of you, and hopefully in doing so, share some of that happiness the series has given me. And so I thought, why not do that through the lens of the opening? I may talk about the second one at some point too, but if you've seen it, you know it's not as stylish as the first, or dense with references. I still love it, and especially how it captures the series' more wholesome aspects, but there isn't as much to dig into. So let's do this. Oh, and by the way, this will contain some minor manga spoilers. The opening starts off by showing a heart. Heavy symbolism, I know. What could they possibly be hinting at? Said heart is then immediately blurred as Kaguya and Shirogane enter the frame. This is done, one, simply because of rules regarding basic cinematography and depth of field, but can also be played off as the duo frequently getting in the way of their own feelings. If they were just honest and clear about how they felt, there would be no blurring of intentions or need for the vast amount of mind games and trickery we see in the series. For Kaguya and Shirogane though, things aren't that simple, as it's shown the mere thought of the other being close to them is enough to get them flustered and blur things anyway, because at the end of the day, geniuses or not, they are still teenagers. And I say thought because this close proximity is immediately shown to have been a trick that animation allows for, with the two actually standing on opposite sides of the logo that accompanies the title. This circular motion into the red and blue tinted lineups of Kaguya and Shirogane is indicative of their very cyclical battles that are encapsulated by each chapter or third of an episode, with each trying to get the upper hand by outwitting the other. At this point, it's also worth mentioning the song which kicks in just before this big rotation bit. The lyrics aren't anything too deep. The first lines refer to a desire to be loved, which underneath layer upon layer of comedy, drama, and mind game bullshit is really all Kaguya and Shirogane want from each other. The rest of the lyrics basically reflect those other themes, talking about destiny, confessions, and things getting progressively more dramatic. There's also a line about this being a game that only two can play, which, pushing aside any literal interpretation that might seem to call out polyamory, within the bounds of the narrative, this is telling us that from the get-go, it's a story about these two. There won't be any love triangles or pentagrams or harem shenanigans that series of this genre are known for using, at least between these two principal characters. And for me at least, that is a good bit refreshing and welcome. The series is free instead to focus on slowly building up the romance between them, which is beyond adorable and heartwarming to see. Getting back to the opening though, it's worth noting that the song is sung by Masayuki Suzuki, who's known as the king of love songs in Japan. I don't think I need to tell you how perfect that is. And just look at this man. Tell me you wouldn't want him to sing about your love life, or any part of your life. The song is energetic, upbeat, and tonally perfect for the series. On the visual side, we see the lineups of Kaguya and Shirogane in their respective colors they are associated with, each wielding a different weapon. As far as I know, these don't hold any specific significance themselves beyond reinforcing the love is war aspect of the title. And speaking of which, we then see the full title as our two main characters are surrounded by the heart that then becomes the logo. We then transition to Chika and the rest of the supporting cast. Notably, none of the aforementioned lyrics play over this part until the very end, which functions as a lead-in to Kaguya. That is to say, none of the lyrics are about anyone in this grouping, reinforcing that focus on Kaguya and Shirogane. Those in this lineup along with Chika include Hayasaka, Kaguya's maid and confidant for all her troubles, Ishigami, who's also on the student council and in close contention for best boy of the series, Kei, Shirogane's younger sister, Kashiwagi, one of Kaguya's sort of close friends, and her boyfriend, who, yes, remains unnamed until later in the series. He's also sort of friends with Shirogane. We also have characters who don't play much of a significant role in Season 1. Karen and Erika, who are members of the Mass Media Club, are also stars of the 4-Koma manga spin-off We Want to Talk About Kaguya. There's not much to say about them beyond that, they're head over heels for her, and we may see some of their shenanigans in Season 2. And last but not least, we have Maki, who thus far has been relegated to cutaway shots whenever Kachiwagi and her boyfriend are featured. You can probably piece together why, but I won't spoil anything here because it's not really relevant. After this, the OP leads into two sequences which parallel one another, with the first being Kaguya walking into the office, thereby flustering Shirogane, with the reverse happening in the next bit. There isn't a ton to unpack here. The repetition potentially symbolizes the repeated attempts from each of their perspectives to formulate some likely convoluted plan before ultimately their facade cracks. That said, there are a few noteworthy contrasts. Shirogane's repetition, for example, is notably choppier than Kaguya's, with his action continuously starting over via a cut, compared to hers, which repeats using a smooth rewind. I see this as a juxtaposition of their personalities. Shirogane tends to be worse at hiding his initial reaction to something, whereas Kaguya is much more skilled. As we see throughout the series, she has a number of tactics for concealing or altering her emotions. We'll likely see even more of that in Season 2. But as this comparison also shows, Kaguya, when she does break, normally has a bigger reaction. Next up, we have a sequence that feels very Mr. and Mrs. Smith-esque, again showing their respective colors as we neatly transition into this section showing their shadows to actually be each other getting the jump on them. It's mostly stylish and doesn't tell us much of what we don't already know, that no matter how on guard each of them are, there's still room for those feelings about the other to render them helpless, and or dead. It also keeps with that love is war theme because guns. This leads into one of my favorite shots in the opening as we see Chika and Ishigami trapped in playing cards surrounded by the rest of the deck. On one level, it's a reference to the time that Kaguya and Shirogane played Old Maid in the early chapters, a segment which ultimately wasn't adapted. Similar to how Chika releasing the bug at the end of her ED was also a reference to a chapter that didn't make the cut. As far as symbolism goes, though, Chika being the Joker in and of itself makes sense, as does her expression that shows she's relishing the role. Compare this to Ishigami, who is just begging to be released from this hell. Though if you'll allow me to extrapolate a little bit, there is another piece of symbolism I take away from this. In a lot of traditional card games, the Joker is omitted. It doesn't have a role, and even when it does, it's often referred to as a wild card. Another description that fits Chika to a T in the narrative. But as a result, people normally refer to a standard deck of cards as a 52 set, excluding the Joker. And this is where I might go a little off the analytical deep end, as it were, because by adding Chika to the mix as a wild card, you are effectively increasing the randomness, the chaos factor, if you will, by orders of magnitude. The idea behind this lies in the mathematical term factorial, which is where you multiply a number by every number below it in a sequence. That new number then tells you how many times you can arrange that set in a unique way. For example, 2 factorial is just 2, because you can either have it be 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. 4 factorial is 24, 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And 5 factorial is 120, so you can see how quickly this starts to stack up. This rule is why your chances of properly shuffling a deck and coming up with a result you, or frankly anyone else in history has previously shuffled, is infinitesimally small. 52 factorial is 8.065 plus a bunch of other numbers times 10 to the 67th power, which is frankly too big to comprehend or even try to give you an example of. And ticking that up 1 to 53 factorial puts us at 4.27, and again a bunch of other numbers, times 10 to the 69th power. Nice. But back to why this matters. Chika is often the unaccounted for variable in any number of plans formulated by Kaguya or Shirogane. We see this in episode 1, where her sudden suggestion opens the floodgates for countless new variables, leading to our main duo burning out because their big brains simply couldn't handle it. Chika is an embodiment of chaos through and through, no matter how much you analyze it. And as far as Ishigami goes, him being an ace and therefore accounted for in the original 52 makes sense. He's obviously still a variable, but one that is more often than not taken into account by either of the duo. We see this when Kaguya proves to be several steps ahead of him in his desire to quit the student council. Ishigami is also the type of character who would likely try to remove himself from being a part of any of that chaos in someone else's life if he could. He just doesn't want to bother anyone else, so I think him wanting out of the card is also indicative of that desire. Alas, like with Chika, we see him being roped in by the much larger game Shirogane and Kaguya are playing. It's just kinda how relationships work. Which is why we're pulled back into seemingly one of their ongoing duels through a fade transition. Also, it's worth noting here that the same cyclical imagery is present in the rotation of the cards. These next pair of shots aren't anything special, just Kaguya and Shirogane looking up and leaning in, again under the assumption this is one of their many battles of wit. The multicolored copies of each of them popping up also reinforces this idea that their battles often end the same way. It's similar to those lineup shots earlier in the opening. The repetition makes sense though, it is after all a foundation of the story at the beginning. This also serves as a transition into probably the most memorable part of the opening, visually speaking, with this trippy kaleidoscopic progression of Shirogane and Kaguya facing off with more and more ridiculous weaponry. Though for as flashy as it is, there isn't a ton of substance. There isn't much significance in their choice in armaments beyond Kaguya having a bow and arrow making sense with her being in the archery club. Weapons just don't have a big role in the series proper even on a symbolic level, so it's hard to squeeze much meaning out of them. The same goes for the background in this sequence. It's pretty, but ultimately just noise. The next shot of Chika dancing though does have a bit more to offer. We see her blissfully unaware of the ongoing battle between her friends, classic Chika, before the background changes from one of flowers to a buttload of hand grenades and some keep-out tape. This seems to relate back to her being an agent of chaos, often chucking a metaphorical hand grenade onto a situation that was close to being resolved, only to blow things wide open again. I also like how this similar idea of an explosion is present in the previous shot of the characters fanning out from her epicenter. This dance then leads into the next shot via the tiniest but still greatly appreciated match cut of Shirogane literally bearing his heart. Why he does it 3 times though, with different colors only to reveal he's seemingly a Time Lord? Yeah, I don't know. I have a few guesses, but they involve an event that likely isn't going to be covered even by the end of Season 2. But regardless, the symbolism here still works on the surface level because, well, they're hearts, and we're talking about love. It's a stupidly simple motif the opening and series uses often because, frankly, they'd be stupid not to. Next, we see a sequence where many colored copies of our 4 central characters are running around a central point, hamster wheel style, and then as we zoom out, we see Kaguya and Shirogane in profile. This also feels like a microcosm of the series, with all these characters moving reminding me of gears turning inside the minds of our 2 leads. Variables to process and consider. There's also that aforementioned cyclical motion that's been constantly present, and various mathematical and scientific imagery flanking each of them, making it clear that this is again them putting together some convoluted plan to make the other confess. Following this up, we have a sequence that seems to be a continuation of earlier in the opening when Shirogane and Kaguya were first facing off. The hearts in their shadows and pink-tinted guns they each hold behind them are another clear reminder of their true intentions being concealed by their outward demeanor, aside from the brief hearts we see appear in their eyes when they both glance at each other. This is a bit of imagery that's also used in the Japanese volume covers for the manga, and as far as symbolism goes, it fits with eyes being the window to the soul and therefore a glimpse at their true feelings for one another. The weaponry again doesn't factor in much. I don't know specific gun types too well, but Shirogane's appears to be some kind of pistol, and Kaguya's may be a derringer or some other small handgun. Before they fire them though, we get a brief interlude of the main cast dancing to the beat of the song. Beyond that, there doesn't appear to be much hidden meaning. The most I could say is that since they're all wearing gloves and Chika is the only one showing any kind of actual emotion, it may be one of her many games that she's subjecting the rest of the cast to. And with that, Kaguya and Shirogane draw their weapons as we see the school destroyed in a pink explosion of love and hearts, with both of their most notable articles of clothing among the rubble alongside the logo one last time. The implication here being that their antics ultimately led to the destruction of both themselves and everything around them. Although my personal headcanon is that it was those grenades Chika symbolizes. The smoke matches her signature color, and never underestimate the love detective. But if we want to look at the more obvious cause, the brief sequence serves as one of the core ideas Kaguya-sama builds to. Getting someone else to confess and being dishonest about your feelings to both yourself and the other party in question is nothing but destructive in the long run. It's by no means a revolutionary thesis, but for characters placed into the boxes they are at the start of the series, it's the most important lesson they can learn. And honesty in any relationship, romantic or otherwise, is easy to preach about, and yet people struggle to practice it all the time. So watching this slow burn of a romance develop, the highs and the lows, makes this message feel so much more tangible and important, and ultimately makes the series more satisfying to experience because of that. Kaguya-sama Love is War is a series that I love, and it clearly has had a lot of love put into it. be that on the part of its mangaka Aka Akasaka, the anime adaptation by A1 Pictures and director Mamoru Hatakeyama, or the vocal performances of the entire cast. There isn't an aspect of this series that doesn't put the biggest smile on my face whenever I rewatch an episode or read a new chapter, which is plainly put why it's become one of my new favorites. In the end, I just really tend to value series that can make me smile or make me happy, and in a time like this, I think we could use more series like those. So if you watch this for some reason without watching the series, I highly recommend it. But those are just my thoughts, and as always, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Is there anything you think I missed, or that you might have interpreted differently, especially when it comes to all the weaponry? How about your thoughts on the EDs? Everyone knows the Chica dance, which is littered with references in its own right, but honestly, the regular one is also packed with symbolism and a joy to listen to. Those thoughts and others are always welcome down below. Thank you so much for watching though, and as always, an especially big thanks goes out to my awesome patrons, OverjoyedSoup, MVPino, James Morton, Marbled Ranger, Spudge, Beorn, Yuki Aly, and everyone else whose support helps make videos like these possible. Links to that Patreon if you'd like to join them, my shirts, and everything else are either down below or on the screen right now. Leave a like and be sure to click that bell icon to keep up to date, or you could just follow me on Twitter for updates. Stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.